Welcome to Market Overtime. I'm Caroline Woods on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Our guest today is the creator and host of the podcast Coin Stories and a veteran journalist to discuss all things crypto. I'm happy to be joined by Natalie Brunell. Natalie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
And I'm looking forward to hearing more about your podcast and more of the stories that you hear on that podcast. But first, let's talk about Bitcoin's price action, because we've seen it, as low as 38,000, as high as 70,000+. Help us make sense of the moves that we've been seeing.
Well, this year, Bitcoin did tremendously well. It was up more than 100%. The ETF approval really helped with that. And it actually went the longest without seeing a 25% drawdown. So we were really due for a correction. And that's what we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks. The German government was selling. We've had miners under pressure after the halving. But short-term volatility is to be expected with Bitcoin. So we encourage people not to trade, not to use leverage, because those positions can really get washed out when Bitcoin moves very quickly up or down. This is really your long-term savings technology, because today it is more difficult to save than ever before. You really want to short the currency, which is constantly getting debased, and go long, hard, scarce assets. And there's nothing more scarce and nothing that has really performed better than Bitcoin.
So if you're going long Bitcoin, you're obviously bullish in the longer term. So what are some of the most bullish price targets that you're hearing on your podcast? Because I've heard as low as zero, and I've heard as high as, millions.
Yeah, I mean, people are all across the board here. Some are even more bullish than I am. Some are predicting that Bitcoin is going to hit 7 figures. It hasn't even hit the 6-figure mark, which sometimes surprises me. But I have had guests recently who feel very strongly that Bitcoin is going to hit 100,000 to 150,000 even this year, including my most recent guest, Tom Lee, who's a macro advisor from Fundstrat. You can often see him on Wall Street talk shows. And he predicts that Bitcoin will hit 150,000 by the end of this year. A lot of other folks think that as well, but you always have to consider a lot of macro factors. We are seeing more liquidity when it comes to the level of the money supply, the M2. That's always very bullish for Bitcoin. At the same time, interest rates remain high. We're not sure what the Fed is going to do come fall. We also have an election. So there are a lot of factors that can continue to push Bitcoin's volatility. But in the long run, again, I think Bitcoin is one of the best places that you can really put your savings, your hard-earned money, for it to increase in purchasing power as opposed to the opposite.
And I want to talk about all of those catalysts in just a minute, but in terms of your optimism in Bitcoin, where do you actually draw it from? What makes you bullish?
What makes me bullish is having taken the time to really understand Bitcoin. I started, like so many people, being very skeptical. You're always a Bitcoin skeptic and you're against Bitcoin before you're for it. And we're seeing so many people turn around, including folks like Larry Fink, who was recently on CNBC talking about how he's such a big believer in Bitcoin. And I was the same. I didn't trust it. I thought because it's digital, it can be hacked. I also really, I realized that I didn't understand how the internet or networks functioned. And I had to humble myself. I had to go down a path of knowledge and discovery to really understand, how does Bitcoin work? Why is it so secure, immutable? Why is it resistant to censorship and hacking? And when I got there, that's when I became so convicted that this is actually not just the future of savings, but also the future of money, the future of how we interact with one another and exchange value. I think the biggest problem that people face today is that the financial system is really rigged in a sense to benefit the few and the privileged at the expense of everyone else. And this really levels the playing field. And I think it will bring more opportunity to the most amount of people. And I think it will make the system more fair and accessible around the globe. And I think that that will bring about some of the best innovation and creativity that has yet to be unleashed when it comes to human ingenuity and prosperity. And I look forward to it. I really do believe that Bitcoin will usher in sort of a renaissance when it comes to entrepreneurship and value.
So there's the Larry Finks of the world, who initially he wasn't a believer, but did his research and now obviously is. BlackRock has the ETF. In terms of the other end, there's the Warren Buffetts of the world, who he's not a believer, and he says you have to invest in what you understand. So For those people who don't necessarily understand the technology, the coins, what would you say a good place to start would be for them? Or what are the biggest hurdles that they need to overcome when learning more about this?
Well, the greatest thing about Bitcoin right now is there are so many resources out there. There are podcasts like mine, there are books, there are videos. Most of them are free. It just takes a few minutes to start learning. The other best way is for people to actually start interacting with the asset. Download a wallet, purchase some satoshis, some sats, fractions of a Bitcoin, and try sending it to someone. See how easy it is. See the fact that there was no third party or intermediary between you with that transaction. I think people need to just take a little bit of time. And I get it when people are skeptical. Again, you don't want to invest in something you don't understand. And usually small allocations are the best place to start. Now more and more money managers are recommending 1% to 2% Bitcoin. And eventually investors see that that grows because of the price appreciation. And suddenly it's taking up 5, 10, 20% of their portfolio. And at that point, I think it is really critical for people to take the time to learn about what Bitcoin is, how the network works, why it's such a powerful opportunity, especially for young people to save for the future, and then maybe take that next step to take self-custody. With Bitcoin now, it's never been more convenient to buy it. You can just click a button on your traditional brokerage account, but that's not self-custodied Bitcoin. So there's always something new to learn with Bitcoin. And what's really great it is a digital bearer instrument that you can take self-custody and become self-sovereign with your financial future.
Yeah, there certainly are more ways than ever before to have exposure to Bitcoin, especially with the ETFs. How are the majority of people that come on your show actually buying Bitcoin? Are they buying it outright with cold wallets and such, or are they buying into ETFs?
I interview a range of people. Some people are for Bitcoin, some are against, but the majority of people who are Bitcoin believers, they purchase spot Bitcoin and they take self-custody. Again, some of this can feel very technical or intimidating, but I feel like, think back on the 90s when the internet was coming out. I feel like a lot of people were intimidated by the internet. They didn't think that we would be interacting with one another digitally for commerce and communication, and now it's really taken over our lives and businesses. And I think with Bitcoin, it's going to be similar. There's going to be a little bit of a hurdle in terms of just learning. But once people get there, they're going to be interacting with this asset constantly. Wallets make it very easy. Cold storage is a lot easier than people think it is. It's literally no more difficult than putting files on a hard drive. And so I really think that more and more people will take that step, again, because then they are sovereign over their money. They don't have to trust a bank. They don't have to trust a third party. They don't have to trust an exchange. They really can control their finances 100% in a way that people have not been able to do except for with cash.
Wait a minute. No more difficult than saving to a hard drive. What about the 24 code words and the extra
the seed
code
phrase?
word? I mean, don't you still need to do all of that?
Yeah, so you get a seed phrase that's 12 or 24 words. You decide if you want 12 or 24, and then it's just a matter of writing those down and keeping that in a very safe place. Some people etch it into steel plates. Some people put it in on a piece of paper, not the safest. Some people memorize it in their head. So I would say that's pretty easy to do, 24 words written down somewhere.
And some people do write it down and don't remember where they put it, but that's for another time. I'm curious, what drew you to the crypto space? How did you get involved?
Sure. So I was a journalist doing breaking news and investigative reporting prior to switching completely to Bitcoin education. And like so many people, I recognized that there was a problem. I noticed that people were struggling. They were living increasingly more paycheck to paycheck, not able to afford education, healthcare, the rising cost of living. And people were starting to fight about all these issues and turn more and more to a very polarized version of the politics I grew up with. I felt like people were placing themselves in teams. It was your, left or right, left, blue or red. And I think we need to look deeper than that, because until I learned about Bitcoin, I didn't realize that our greatest issue is it's not a political one. It's really a financial one. It's an economic one. It's the fact that our money is a monopoly. The state has a monopoly over money. It is not decentralized. It is not scarce. They can print trillions of units with the stroke of a key that dilutes everybody's purchasing power and savings. And we really have no say in this process. We've sort of baked inflation into the cake and made it okay. And yet look at what we have as a result. Most people are not able to afford the very things that they were able to just a couple decades ago. Young people are really struggling. They can't afford the houses their parents or grandparents could. College education and healthcare costs are skyrocketing. So we need to take a step back and say, can we actually fix this from the system? Because we keep electing one side or another. We kind of ping pong back and forth, and yet the problems keep growing worse. And we're seeing our leaders getting enriched and more powerful and wealthy, while the average person is suffering. The problem is economic. We really need to fix the money. And I did not understand that until Bitcoin. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about it, increasing people's financial literacy and understanding of the economic system, because really our schools and our media don't do a great job at explaining how our money works.
So how does Bitcoin, which could fall, as you said, 25%, it can fall 80%, it could potentially go to zero, solve that problem?
Well, we have to look at this again as a long-term fix for a very deep-rooted problem. We have to give people back the ability to save and to rely on a form of money that cannot be manipulated by any party, any group of people, any nation state. And right now we have a system where our supply of money is controlled by a small group of people. They can artificially suppress or increase interest rates. They can increase the supply. And for most people, they don't have a say in that system, but it affects their savings and their ability to catch up with the cost of living. Wages do not keep up with asset inflation. And as the government prints more and more money, we're now 35 trillion in debt. That money tends to go to the people who are the closest to the money printer. And that means special interest groups. That means the people who are the wealthiest, the most creditworthy, the people closest to the political actors, and everyone else is downstream and suffers from the rising cost of living that they can no longer afford. So what's going to bridge that gap? We really need a form of money that, again, is out of the hands of people. Let's put the power into a network that is decentralized, that's backed by mathematics and the laws of thermodynamics and energy, and that's really backed by the best properties that a money could have. And that will, I think, allow people to have more freedom and the ability to save for the long run. Because although, again, it's volatile in the short term, like you said, it has these major price swings. When you zoom out, Bitcoin has been the best performing asset out of anything. Most years, it outperforms every single stock, every stock index, real estate, gold. It is really the best place that people have been able to save money for the long run.
So if it's a long-term fix, you look at it as a risk-on investment, a hedge against inflation, a store of value, a safety play. What is it?
I see it as the solution to currency debasement, which again destroys everyone's savings, but benefits very few people. People who hold assets right now are richer than ever before, and people who are saving money, the wage workers, the working class, their savings have been destroyed and they're trying to catch up with how much their grocery bills now are. Some of them who are young are posting videos online on social media of how frustrated they are because they can't catch up. Again, we need a fix for that. So the fix for currency debasement, the true fix for inflation, is a currency like Bitcoin, is a form of money and a savings technology that no one can ever manipulate. You can buy a fraction of it. You don't need to save for a massive down payment. You don't need to, try to purchase a whole Bitcoin. You could buy one Satoshi today and start saving in this new form of money, because I think we're in a phase transition similar to the one that we were in when we adopted the internet, right? It changed again how we do business, how we communicate. Slowly but surely, every business got online, every person got online. And I think that that's what we're going to see with Bitcoin too. There are projections that by 2030, we will see more than 1 billion users on Bitcoin, and we're slowly heading there. And in our country, I think, things are looking good when you have presidential candidates endorsing Bitcoin.
Yes, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I am curious, how often are you using Bitcoin as a means to pay for things, as an actual currency right now?
So the other day, I used Bitcoin to send a donation for a fundraiser. When I travel, there are sometimes places that take Bitcoin and prefer to take Bitcoin, like when I went to El Salvador. So I paid in Bitcoin. But primarily for me and what I want for, in terms of my economic situation, I want to save for the future. So I see it more as a store of value. But that doesn't mean I shy away from spending a little bit here and there, especially to support local businesses. There are more Bitcoin businesses popping up all over the place. And I do want to support people who want to sort of help the community grow and help people expand so that Bitcoin can be used in commerce. But for me, number one is store of value.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about some of those catalysts that you've mentioned. Obviously, the election is coming up. Former President Trump has called himself the crypto president. Talk to me about the election as a potential catalyst. What could that do to the price of Bitcoin?
I just think it's really exciting to see how far we've come in 15 years. The fact that we have multiple presidential candidates, President Trump as well as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., talking about how they want to embrace Bitcoin. They want to protect the right to self-custody. They want to create a favorable regulatory framework to see this industry thrive. And some are even talking about the idea of backing U.S. treasuries by a hard, scarce asset like Bitcoin. So I'm very hopeful. I see Bitcoin as completely bipartisan and apolitical. I'm surprised the other political party, the other candidate, has not embraced it yet, but I think we will see a turnaround. Again, everyone is against Bitcoin before they're for it. President Trump was vocal that he thought that it was a threat to the dollar. And now, because he's taken a little bit of time to learn about it, he understands how powerful it could be and how it can keep America number one when it comes to technology, innovation, cybersecurity, and so many other industries, including energy. So I'm really hopeful. I think that we're going to take a big step forward. The vice president candidate that President Trump chose, he is a Bitcoiner. So I think the first person on the ticket that actually holds Bitcoin. And I think that in future elections, both small and national, we're going to see more and more orange candidates.
He's also been a critic. He's also been a critic. J.D. Vance has also been a critic of Gary Gensler and his crackdown on digital assets. So do you expect, if a so-called crypto president is elected, do you expect a regulatory thaw?
I do, and I think we're moving in that direction. We recently saw some shifts with the SEC, including with the approval of the spot Bitcoin ETFs, which was years in the making. I mean, so many companies have fought hard, organizations have fought hard for this to give people access in a traditional portfolio to be able to save in this asset and to package it like a traditional security. So I think that more steps and strides will be taken in order to embrace Bitcoin and allow people to save in this technology and do it in a way where they do feel safe and comfortable and they understand it. Because right now, for so long, it's been sort of on the fringe, and people, especially organizations, have felt uncomfortable dipping their toe in. And now it's becoming much more legitimized by massive institutions and Wall Street, as well as the regulatory agencies.
And investing in Bitcoin takes some level of understanding the technology, but also a level of forecasting as well. So I'm curious, when you think about the Fed potentially cutting rates later this year, what do you or some of the guests on your show think the impact of that will be on crypto?
Yeah, I think that as well as my guests, we just say they will have to keep printing. So what do you want to own? You want to own something that they cannot print, that someone can't just easily, hit the stroke of a key and produce tens of millions more of. You want something scarce. You want something that can't be controlled, that can't be confiscated from you, that can't be manipulated. And so Bitcoin really does have the majority of the best properties that a money can have. And I really believe that more and more people are going to turn to it as a safe haven asset and a safe harbor as we continue to see more and more currency debasement and chaos around the world. I don't think that these problems are going to be fixed anytime soon. I think that we're still going to have political turmoil. We're going to see more and more geopolitical conflicts, and we're going to see more money printing because someone has to pay for all of these things. So again, I want to place my money money in something that they can't control and manipulate. And that really is that hedge to the currency debasement that is pretty much a guarantee at this point, unfortunately.
In terms of another potential catalyst over the next, say, 20 years, millennials are poised to inherit some $90 trillion of assets and to become the richest generation in history. Fit the millennial bill. Don't necessarily think I'm included in that $90 trillion inheritance count, but you think, I was listening to one of your shows, you think that that millennials are going to buy Bitcoin with their trillions?
Yes. Yes. Well, by the way, I'm not in that either. I am someone who's first generation. I've had to accumulate and build my own wealth, but I'm happy for the millennials who are going to be inheriting all of those assets. And yes, we're already seeing it in the numbers. The statistics are showing that millennials and Gen Z are already very much invested in this space. They're purchasing cryptocurrency at a much faster rate than other generations. And Bitcoin is the one that is the best performing. And so I think more and more people will actually sell their other cryptocurrencies and buy Bitcoin and hold it for the long run and maybe even will it to their children. I think that this is, again, that long-term play where you're not just thinking about your generation and your savings, but the one that comes after, because you can buy and hold Bitcoin for 100 years and put it in your will and your inheritance plan, and then have it for the next generation. And at that point, I mean, I can only imagine what the price will be and how many trillions of dollars in debt more we will be. But I just think it's really encouraging because for so long, millennials and Gen Z have felt left behind. They felt like the system is rigged against them, that they can't catch up, that the things that their parents and grandparents could afford so easily in the 1970s is completely out of reach for them. And Bitcoin is their way to catch up. I think it's going to restore the values that are so core to the American dream and to be able to prosper and take care of yourself and the ones around you financially.
You bring up two good points. Other cryptocurrencies, which I do want to touch upon, but also the generational divide. It's obviously skews younger at this point. Is this something where you think older generations will catch up? Or not necessarily, it'll just be kind of passed down?
I think that some absolutely will. We have some fantastic boomers in the Bitcoin space, and they're doing a great job orange pilling their generation. And so I'm very hopeful. In fact, I partner with a company who's recently, they had a client who was 82 talking about how easy it was to self-custody when someone just kind of walked him through it. I mean, 82 years old putting Bitcoin in self-custody. If that's not inspiring, I don't know what is. And when it comes to just the future generation, I just think everyone's going to be investing in Bitcoin. They might start with 1 to 2%, but they're going to see that has appreciated to take up 5, 10, 20% of their portfolio. And nothing speaks more highly for Bitcoin than number go up, right? That's what makes a flood of new people come in. And I think that they're going to just continue to allocate more and more of their savings to this asset that can't be debased. It's not like bonds. They can't just print more of them. With stocks, even though they've been such a driver of wealth, there is a lot of risk there. People don't have the time to sit there and pull all of the, board meetings and earnings reports and pore over whether or not they think the company is going to be around and successful and not be beat out by competitors in 10 years. The stock indices, they do perform okay when but they're just tracking inflation, right? They're going up maybe 7%, 10% annualized. That's exactly the rate that they're increasing the money supply through money printing. So you're not really winning, you're just kind of treading water. And they make up companies that, a few of them do extremely well. They go up 300% and the rest are potentially declining and they make up for it. So I wouldn't want to put my money in a stock index at this point. Gold has underperformed, and real estate, you can't ship a parcel of real estate across seas, right? For a couple of pennies like you can with Bitcoin. I can't buy a fraction of a piece of property in Miami Beach or a skyscraper in New York, but you can buy a fraction of Bitcoin. So when you start to compare it next to all these other asset classes, Bitcoin continues to really shine.
Wait a minute, I have to ask, because you were saying money managers are saying at this point 1 to 2% of your portfolio should be allocated to crypto. I've heard as much as 5%, but I usually hear between 1 and 3 from the believers. You wouldn't want to be invested in stocks at all at this point?
So I've really divested from a lot of my equity positions over the last few years as I've continued to learn more about Bitcoin because they've underperformed Bitcoin and I see a lot of risk in the future. Again, when I look at any of the companies that I can invest in, I don't know that they're going to be around in 10, 20 years. I don't know if the leadership is going to make great decisions. I don't know if a competitor is going to come around. I don't know if there's going to be some sort of liability risk that I'm not thinking of. And ultimately, they can always issue more stock. And you can't issue more Bitcoin. There's only going to be 21 million. So when you start to compare, again, Bitcoin with all these other asset classes, I think everyone really needs to make their own decision. And I'm a big believer, financial freedom and sovereignty. You decide what's best for your portfolio. But based on my risk tolerance and my understanding of Bitcoin, there's nowhere else I would want my money because again, I've had it in other asset classes and I've just watched Bitcoin outperform all of it. And I wish that instead of having that allocation in gold or S&P 500, that I had just shifted it over to Bitcoin. Right now, I think we're shifting also from less passive investing to more active investing, which carries a lot of risk. People are going to sit there and need to do their homework if they're stock picking. And I just worry about that because Bitcoin is more of a set it and forget it mentality. Again, a savings technology. There's 21 million Bitcoin backed by this powerful network, the most powerful computer network in the entire world. Once you learn about Bitcoin, I mean, I don't see why I would invest anywhere else because I would be selling my winner for potentially some losers.
Wow, all in. I guess you're really putting your money where your mouth is, right? But, you know, we've spent all this time talking about Bitcoin. I'm curious about some of the other digital assets. What about Ethereum? What about Cardano, Solana, the Sushi Swap? There were so many others that we talked about really in the thick of the pandemic. I feel like it's become very Bitcoin focused at this point. What about the others?
When I started my journey, I thought that they were all very similar, and I looked at the price of other tokens. I thought they were cheaper, so I was kind of attracted to maybe trying to put my money there. And I realized that I just didn't understand the technology. I didn't understand what I was investing in. And the only cryptocurrency that has the properties that make good, hard money that can serve on a global scale is Bitcoin. The others just don't meet those thresholds. They're more like digital equities to me. They've all made trade-offs to achieve either more speed, more functionality. And unfortunately for me, I see that as too risky because the trade-off is they lose that either the scarcity or the security or the decentralization. So I want to pick the crypto that is the most secure, the most safe, the one that's truly finite and scarce, and the only one that serves the functions of money is Bitcoin.
All right, we have to leave it there. Natalie Brunell, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you for having me and for talking about Bitcoin.
It was great to talk to you. All right, that's going to do it for Market Overtime. I'm Caroline Woods. Be sure to download the Schwab Network app available in the Apple App Store. And of course, tune in 24/7 on schwabnetwork.com.